Hey, what's good with the YouTube, man? This is your boy Rojo. This is the Rojo Room. Appreciate y'all, man. I gained like 500 subscribers in the last 2 days. All you new people, appreciate the support. And I'm going to try to bring you the best stuff I can. With that in mind, what we're going to talk about today, I know you guys aren't the fondest of articles. Okay. I get it. I found a son of a bitch of an article. You guys are going to trip on it. It involves the way police and informants work together. And this is a crazy case, man. It involves some, no good gentlemen from down the way and participating in convincing people to tell them the details of their crimes while in jail. Like, horrible, man. There's a very valuable lesson in this, too. If you get in trouble, don't talk about your case to nobody other than your lawyer. Straight up. You know, better advice with this, don't get yourself caught up in the bullshit in the first place. But if you do, no matter what it is, man, keep your mouth shut, man. Don't trust nobody, bro. I've seen it happen many times in my county jail. A dude gets a celly, they're in there for 4 months. One's fighting a dope case, maybe, but the other one's fighting a murder. Dude ain't trying to go to jail on his dope case. So what does he do? Gets all the details and this and that. He tells his lawyer, hey, I got some information about a murder. And the next thing you know, he's taking the stand, bro, and he's going home. What's unfortunate that they allow, it's kind of like entrapment in a case, in essence, you know what I mean? But it isn't. Nobody forced him to say them things. He volunteered to do it. So don't volunteer nothing. Only talk to your lawyer, okay? Like I said, better yet, don't commit no dumbass shit that you get caught for. All right. Anyway, this is called a Miranda loophole. And I'm going to knock this out real quick and we'll talk about it. All right. Listen to this. It's kind of long, so bear with me, but it's dope. You're not going to regret listening to this whole thing. Southern California authorities freed 2 enforcers for a violent state prison gang who were facing life sentences and paid them more than $339,000 to work as professional jailhouse informants. Their job was to elicit confessions from uncharged suspects in hard-to-solve murder cases, mainly involving street gangs. They got paid whether they got the confession or not. Wow. The former enforcers for the Mexican Mafia were successful enough that police agencies in 6 California counties used them in an estimated 300 undercover jail operations over 6 years, starting in late 2010 or early 2011, records show. Confessions were sometimes easy to obtain. Some young hoodlums were so anxious to impress Mexican Mafia veterans with tales of their ferocity that they exaggerated the roles of killings, claiming sole credit when evidence clearly showed the murder had been a group activity. I beat that fool to death, one such gang member boasted, according to a transcript of his recorded conversation. Damn, recorded. I burned that fool. When the informant asked why did you kill the fool? He asked, using the form of address common among Southern California Latino street gang members. Is he an enemy? The subject affirmed enemy, and the case was effectively closed. But confessions did not always flow, and in several cases, court records showed the enforcers turned informants, like other Southern California jailhouse informants before them, resorted to death threats to provoke suspects to talk. They claimed suspects were on a green light list of inmates the Mexican Mafia leaders had ordered killed because they were believed to have broken a rule. But if they confessed, admitted the killing of which they were suspected, but denying that they had broken the rule, the enforcers turned informants could go to bat for them and have them removed from the list. That's scandalous, bro. Despite a long-standing U.S. Supreme Court decision that banned confessions obtained under this kind of duress as inherently unreliable, the informants employed death threats with the apparent approval of police, as well as prosecutors, and in some cases, no objections from the defense. In the best documented case, the defendant accepted a generous plea bargain rather than challenge the admissibility of his confession in court. Civil liberties groups and the California Criminal Defense Bar have been facing an uphill battle to rein in such content. Sorry, you guys, mosquitoes are bad tonight. Yeah, let maybe there's a rein in such conduct. The ACLU and Northern California Innocence Project sponsored a bill that sought to limit the attractiveness of becoming a professional informant by capping the pay at $100 per case. Raymond Cuevas and Jose Paredes, who initially worked for leniency in their own cases and relatively cushy jail accommodations, were accustomed to earning fees as high as $3,000. Now, this is where, they show how scandalous this stuff is. Is it bad enough that they use informants to use this information, but when you pay them, it gives them, it's terrible. Anyway, but prosecutors groups successfully blocked the bill, calling it an unwise attempt to restrict what they saw as a useful investigation tool for penetrating violent criminal subcultures, such as those of street gangs affiliated with the Mexican Mafia. They also argued that additional discovery burdens called for in the bill would endanger future informants in the mold of Cuevas and Paredes by revealing too much information about them. Now, the ACLU has turned to the court system to try to gain restraints that they failed to win through legislature. The lawsuit filed last month against the Orange County Sheriff and the Orange County District Attorney contends officials had conducted an illegal informant program for years and withheld details from the defendants and the courts. Told y'all this is crazy. The lawsuit states of the tactics used by informants, including the green light warnings, the threats those informants made and continue to make are plain. They are explicit and they are unconstitutional. And while officials know of the threats, they withhold that information. As it was, some of the defendants who allegedly confessed to Cuevas and Paredes never even learned their names. Even in cases where they testified, Cuevas and Paredes were sometimes referred to only as confidential informants 1 or 2. And that throws out your whole right to cross-examine and all kinds of stuff, bro. This is scandalous. Cuevas and Paredes are today believed to be in the witness protection program. They could not be reached, and their FBI handler, whom they identified when they last appeared in court in late 2016, did not respond to requests for help in contacting them. Who was Cuevas and what is the Mexican Mafia? In one of his court appearances, Cuevas was asked if he enjoyed violence. Who doesn't, he replied. A street gang member since the age of 9, Cuevas was a walking advertisement for gang life. He had the name of the Hollywood area street gang in which he grew up, the Rebels, tattooed across the back of his head and on his stomach. And he wore the tattooed abbreviation R13 on one leg and one hand. The 13 told anyone familiar with the Latino street gang culture that he and the Rebels were affiliated with the notoriously brutal Mexican Mafia, a state prison gang known in Spanish as La M, in which the English means the letter M, the 13th in the alphabet. The MA functions as an insurance policy for Southern California Latino street gang members who find themselves in the state's prison or jails. La MA protects them from other prison gangs representing other regions and or ethnicities. Even Southern Latino gang members who are violent rivals on the streets are expected to set aside their feuds and unite as 13s when they are incarcerated. They are also expected to pay for protection. Affiliated street gangs pay taxes on profits from criminal activity such as drug dealing and extortion. Evading taxes can lead to fast mounting fines. Persistent evasion could lead to physical attacks, even death. Cuevas was a tax collector for one of the Mexican Mafia leaders, Darryl Baca, also known as Night Owl from Artesia, whose words in matters of life and death on his mainly southeast Los Angeles County turf was considered final. Like many Mexican Mafia leaders, Night Owl was stuck in a special housing unit in a supermax prison near the Oregon border. But the prison had trouble containing the reach of such leaders who had techniques to get their orders out. They talked in codes in prison visiting rooms or on the phones to wives, girlfriends, or other outsiders with gang connections who functioned as gang secretaries and used inmates who were being transferred to smuggle out microscopic handwritten letters known as kites. Some kites were used for personal communications, others to give green lights for attacks on gang associates in or out of prison who had repeatedly proven incompetent at carrying out orders or who had improvidently, I don't know that word, broken important gang rules. There were many rules, most intended to limit attention from police. The most well-known was a ban on drive-by shootings that the Mexican Mafia leaders had imposed years ago because too many innocent bystanders were getting hit by errant shots from moving cars. The leaders decided that in the interest of of straighter shooting and keeping police interest to a minimum, affiliate street gang members would henceforth be required to stop their cars and get out, or at least to place one foot on the ground for stability when they saw an enemy from a rival gang who they wanted to shoot. Another rule forbade the killing of prison guards, which also could be expected to trigger far more usual police interest and interfere with cash flow. Cuevas, a three-time convicted robber married to Night Owl's niece, seemed to thrive in this culture of violence until 3 days before Christmas in 2008, when he was arrested for, of all things, gang graffiti. Part of his job as a crew leader on the streets was to mentor teenage tagging crews and help them become organized street gangs that could generate money for the Mexican mafia. He was in his early 30s and testified that the day he got nabbed for felony vandalism was the day he decided he had had enough. I just couldn't believe I got busted again. I was tired of coming back to jail. Cuevas was sent to Los Angeles County North County Correctional Facility, a jail that housed 4,200 of the county's 18,000 jail inmates who were awaiting trials or serving short sentences. He became an informant for the sheriff's department, which ran the jails. This was especially complicated because he had also become the Mexican mafia shot caller for the whole facility, according to a sheriff's detective who worked with him. In that capacity, he collected taxes on drug and cell phones that had been smuggled in as contraband and on whatever inmates spent on food and hygiene products at the jail commissary. He had the power to settle small disputes, decide whether sex offenders and suspected informants should be attacked, and pass along authoritative word from leaders about which inmates merited assassination. Surviving as a shot caller and informant at the same time required a delicate sense of balance, to say the least. When you run a facility, if you show any kind of weakness, other people can walk all over you. And there were times where, there were informants, child molesters, rapists in the dorms, he once testified. I ultimately had the last call on what would happen to them. I would call the sheriffs and tell them to remove those inmates. There was times where I had to make it look good and maybe one or two got assaulted on the way out the door, but at least they escaped with their lives. While playing his dual role, he was attacked with razor blades. The attack was arranged by a representative of another Mexican mafia leader who was angling to get his hands on the thousands of dollars per month being generated from taxes on contraband at North County. The cash wasn't actually in North County. Relatives of inmate taxpayers would typically wire it to gang secretaries using commercial money transfer services. Cuevas survived the razor blade attack and was released. He said that he had got an order from Night Owl to retaliate. Cuevas told incarcerated street gang members under his command that they had a green light to assault and, if possible, stab to death the representative of the rival leader who had ordered him attacked. There was no shortage of volunteers. Committing such an attack was one of the ways to rise in the Mexican mafia. Refusal to commit such an attack was to invite being attacked. Cuevas said he tried to cover his bases by also notifying the sheriff's department of the impending attack and by urging jailers to move the targeted inmate into protective custody, but that did not happen. The man was attacked with a homemade knife, but survived. Cuevas was never prosecuted for ordering the attack. Instead, the sheriff's homicide detectives put him to work on the streets wearing a wire to help them build multiple murder cases against one of his own street crew members, a drug dealer named Rudy Ruiz. Ruiz had led what Cuevas said he regarded as an entirely unnecessary armed assault on members of a motorcycle club not affiliated with any gang while it was holding a charitable fundraiser at a Pico Rivera pizzeria. 3 innocents were killed, 7 wounded. Sheriff's homicide detectives arrested Ruiz within days, but they had to cut him loose when the district attorney's office said there was not enough evidence to charge him. With Cuevas' help, Ruiz was ultimately charged, convicted, and sentenced to death. Stand-up guy. But after this first outing of wearing a wire, things went south for Cuevas. He was living in nearby San Bernardino County when parole authorities searched his residence in 2010 and turned up 2 handguns. The San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office charged him as a felon in illegal possession of the guns and threatened to prosecute him under the California 3 strikes law, which would have given him 25 years to life. Prosecutors offered a discount deal if he pleaded guilty, but the first offer, Cuevas once testified, was 21 years. Then the sheriff's office officials rode to his rescue. They had him released into their custody where he was in early 2011 when a small newspaper, the Whittier Daily News, exposed him as a defector by reporting his testimony at Ruiz's preliminary hearing. Despite the revealing article, authorities decided Cuevas still had value as a jailhouse informant. With the possibility of a life sentence in San Bernardino County still hanging over his head, they began inserting him into cells with uncharged suspects and paying him with letters to San Bernardino authorities recommending leniency. They also began pairing him with another Mexican mafia defector who had found himself in a similar placement. Jose Paredes became an informant for LA County Sheriff's Department Detective Francis Hardiman, the same detective who had recruited Cuevas. Hardiman did not respond to an interview request. Paredes had began his career as a gangster at the age of 13 when he joined another Hollywood area street gang called La Mirada Locos. As an adult, he had served 2 prison terms for assault with a firearm and 1 for carrying a concealed weapon. He had risen to become a shot caller for the Mexican mafia, running daily operations in a small part of one of the prison gang's flagship outposts, the Los Angeles County Mint Central Jail. In this capacity, he had been caught on a wiretap passing along a green light, ordered to stab to death an inmate who had disappointed Paredes' patron, another Mexican mafia leader named Eulalio Martinez, who was said to be overall in charge of the jail. The targeted inmate was an accused murderer whom Paredes had been mentoring. He had exhausted Martinez's patience by twice losing track of smuggled marijuana shipments small enough to fill the finger of a glove. As a result, Paredes later testified, "I made some phone calls to order a hit. Twice, groups of inmates stabbed the victim, but he survived." Nailed by this recording, Paredes was charged with crimes including attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder that could have sent him to prison for 150 years to life. Instead, he signed a formal agreement with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office in which he agreed to inform on Martinez and on 19 other named defendants in 12 cases involving 21 murders. If he kept the end of his bargain, his family would be relocated and he could reunite with them after serving a sentence of only 8 years. Not everything went according to plan. Martinez died in jail of a heroin overdose before the trial. And in one of the 12 cases, an intermediate state appeals court said that there may have been reason to question Paredes and Hardiman's credibility on a key point. It reversed 2 attempted murder convictions in part because a trial court judge had not allowed defendants to explore it. Although Cuevas also figured into that case, he and Paredes were both identified by name in the publicly available appeals court decision. Their names remained state secrets as far as some prosecutors were concerned. These prosecutors maintained, with the backing of some courts in Los Angeles and Orange County, that it was too dangerous to share the names of the informants with the defendants of whom they had informed. In the Los Angeles County case against John Silva Ramirez, for example, prosecutors introduced evidence in the form of a recording that Ramirez's brother and co-defendant had admitted to unnamed jailhouse informants that Ramirez had shot to death a man who had been in an argument with their father. Superior Court Judge Jesse Rodriguez ruled the co-defendants' recorded admissions could be used against Ramirez, but that the defendants were not entitled to know the informants' identities or question them as a witness because the defendants were unable to substantiate their claims that the informants were high-level Mexican mafia associates who had been planted by police in a cell with the brother and questioned him in an intimidating manner. Ramirez was convicted and sentenced to 80 years to life. Ramirez's appeal lawyer, Patrick Ford, pointed out that his trial lawyers faced a catch-22. How could they prove their contentions about the informant if the trial judge would not make the prosecutors tell them the informant's name? Now, while they were in custody as informants, Cuevas and Paredes were separated from other inmates, at first in a small Los Angeles County detention center, then at the Anaheim Police Department jail. There, they had a wing to themselves, and according to court records, access to video game system, television, DVD, a laptop, private food cabinets, microwave, hot plate, refrigerator, coffee maker, unlimited telephone calling cards, a washer and a dryer, exercise equipment, and private dental care. Family members stopped by to deliver groceries and hygiene products and for face-to-face visits. Detectives sometimes treated them to fast food takeout. When it was time to go to work, detectives from whatever police department needed them would brief them on their suspect and the circumstances of the killing, and typically prime the suspect by telling him he was about to be charged. While the suspect contemplated the possibility of spending the rest of his life in correctional institutions under the thumb of the Mexican mafia, he would be ushered into a cell with one or both of the former Mexican mafia enforcers. Paredes and Cuevas did not announce themselves as enforcers, but their behavior suggested they were well-connected Mexican mafia gangsters. Court records showed they sometimes spoke in a form of sign language that defeated the efficiency of the wires they wore. Mexican mafia associates use sign language in prison to relay messages back and forth, so it's mandatory that you learn sign language. They also sometimes conversed in Nahuatl, a relatively obscure language tied to the Aztecs, which experienced Mexican mafia associates used in prison because correction officers generally did not understand it. Sometimes, either in an effort to convince their cellmate suspects that it was safe to confide in them or to set an intimidating tone, they name-dropped nicknames of prominent Mexican mafia members and talked about murders they claimed to have witnessed and assignments to smuggle kites. Physical violence was apparently rare. Only twice in his time as a jailhouse informant was Paredes accused of assaulting a suspect. Michael Baker, an alleged drug addict who was suspected in a long unsolved disappearance and presumed murder of his 82-year-old grandmother, said Paredes, a 300-pound man, once twisted his arm painfully behind his back while the smaller Cuevas demanded he confess. If he did not, he said to Cuevas, his father, who was then in state prison for securities fraud, would be murdered. The other alleged death threats accounted to psychological violence. The enforcers told gang member murder suspects in several cases that they had been placed on a green light list for having broken a gang rule. But perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. If the suspect confessed, the enforcers could go to bat for them with gang leaders and get the name taken off the list. I mean, this story goes on and on. I just wanted to cover as much as I could to get you an idea of how messed up this thing is. We always tell everybody, man, that this life it's no joke, man. With it comes a lot of twists and turns and bullshit, and these guys are getting paid, living well, working off cases, and using the threat of a green light, bro, to make you confess to some shit. And they're recording it and testifying against it. Let this be a lesson about this lifestyle, man, that they got some alley oops for you. You know what I mean? The DA, the sheriff's department, and other people you don't know, man, communicating's hard sometimes. Somebody goes and they get arrested, they strike a deal before they even hit the main jail. They're already working. They're portraying like they're all good. And the whole time, they're cooperating from the day one. And you might never not even know it or suspect it, especially when somebody comes in who paroled all good, who has some status. Like, I don't think these guys were necessarily really made members. In my opinion, I think they were just associates. However, you get to be a certain age, you have a certain look, conduct yourself a certain way. When you start dropping some big names and you got the righteous way of speaking and the rules inside and out, man, you'll get some young kids to tell you whatever, bro, because they're like, oh, this is the big homie, man. He has some advice for me, whoop-de-whoop. Nah, man, them big homies are going to destroy you. You know what I mean? But there's 20 more pages of this story, man. But, I'm tired of reading it. You guys got the point. I've seen it happen, man. I knew this one dude that was in there for a hot one in Contra Costa. And his celly did him like that. His celly was fighting a dope case and went home. Dude sitting there and murder. They put a damn recorder right in the vent system. You know what I mean? And it's just, I don't know how they don't need a warrant. It's their jail. You know what I'm saying? But there's crazy things that happen, man, and the way they use informants and whoop-de-whoop. I mean, this is a way out case because it goes above and beyond. It's like, man, you're just, you hear about people, they'll tell on people, to get out of a case, man. But, man, 300 people over years and years and years, and they were keeping them in just a regular jail and sending them to different jails as needed to elicit confessions under threat of getting put on the hit list. Man, that's crazy to me, dude. That is crazy. But like I said, though, man, let this be a lesson for the way things go down in there, man. You never know who you're talking to, what they've done. If it's your family member, man, even still, bro, especially if you got a serious case, which could really result in some serious time, your lawyer is the only person who you can trust, and not all of them are cool either, man. There's bad lawyers too that'll, they might be working for some of your homeboys and be like, hey, this dude whoop-de-whoop, and just, you never know, man. Human beings aren't perfect. They might not even be trying to do it in a malicious fashion. But at the end of the day, man, you got to think, man, is your freedom worth taking that chance over? You know what I'm saying? There's scandalous stuff going on every day. Don't think, you talk about it with your homeboys. It ain't like doing this or doing that. You might be sealing your own fate. Anyway, I thought that was a crazy story, so I wanted to share it with y'all. This is your boy Rojo. This is the Rojo Room, and think before you act.